Welcome back to Joyfully at Home. Today we're going to make a fast and easy treat that's technically from a leftover. When you make a pie, generally you have some leftover pie dough, and especially pie dough that I use is my great grandma's recipe that I've had and used without fail many, many years. And this recipe is also on our channel here. It's in our list of videos, and we'll put a link to it right in the description. So it'll be easily accessible if you want to try to use that. But you always have a little bit of leftover pie dough. So instead of wasting that pie dough, we've always just used it as a little treat. So we go ahead and add a little butter and a little cinnamon to it, and we make cinnamon pinwheels. So that's what we're going to make today with some leftover pie dough. So you'll start with your pie dough patty on a floured surface. Spread out your flour so you've got it, this way your pie dough is not going to stick to your surface. You try to usually get it back into a somewhat of a circular shape. If you've got this and it's all been cut off and it's left over, it'll be in a regular shape. Just give your rolling pin a little dust of flour, and then you just start rolling out your pie dough. You're going to want to get your pie dough, and it doesn't necessarily have to be circular because these are obviously made from leftover. That doesn't have to be a perfect shape. I usually just try to keep my edges together a little bit so they're not breaking. And you roll this out till you're about 1/4 of an inch thick. You want it to be fairly thin. You don't want it to be too thick because that will just make it so you don't get a nice pinwheel out of your dough. So you just continue to roll until you have your pie dough all rolled out and you've got a nice thin pie dough patty. So you continue to roll out until you're just about there, adding just a little bit more flour as you go so you don't stick and your rolling pin doesn't stick. And sometimes I even like to take it and give it a little turn so you're making sure that you get all areas evenly spread out, rolled out. And if you have a pie circle, pie board, whatever, you can use that as well. You don't have to do this. This is the old-fashioned way, which is the way I do most everything. I don't have a lot of fancy pie circles or anything like that. I just kind of eyeball things, especially when it comes to my pie making. I do things kind of the way my grandma used to do it and just wing it and go by feel and by look. So that's just how I learned to do it, and you get it fairly circular and out nice and thin. And we're just about ready for our next step. Again, these are so super easy and they're great to do with any leftover pie dough that you have. So now that you've got a nice thin thickness, and I'll even show you, I'll lift it up. It's really quite thin. You want to make sure that it's quite thin. It's still nice and pliable, but it's all about the same thickness all the way through your dough. And then you just take some softened butter. And this is technically soft butter. I've had it sitting out a while, but our air conditioning in our house is always a nice 72 degrees, so it's not necessarily really, really soft. So it's a little bit thicker. So I get this stirred up a little bit so it'll spread nicely. And you just can basically start by putting your butter on your dough. And with the butter, I generally will use about 1/4 of a cup. So it's about a half a stick of butter for a patty about this size. If you want a little more, a little less, that's entirely up to you. But I feel like this gives it a nice buttery texture, and the flavor is incredible. And it makes it so your cinnamon and your cinnamon sugar actually will go ahead and have a nice surface to adhere to before you're rolling. So you just take this and spread this out with a spatula or even a butter knife, whatever you happen to have. Just spread it out so you've got a nice coating of butter all over the top of your pie dough. Okay, now that you have your butter spread over your crust, over your pie dough crust, you want to make sure that you try to get it as close to the edges as possible so that way you don't have any missed spots of cinnamon and any parts that aren't covered with butter. Now you're just going to take any cinnamon sugar that you like. I tend to make our own, and I use the Saigon cinnamon because it has a lot more flavor to it. It has a lot more of a complex flavor, a type of cinnamon. It's the only cinnamon that I use. And you can get this at any Costco or Amazon, probably even Wegmans, but I usually get it from Costco. And you just mix your cinnamon with granulated sugar to make your cinnamon sugar blend. You can also just buy ready-made cinnamon sugar blends in the store. It's up to you, whichever you prefer. And then you just sprinkle your cinnamon sugar all over the top of your butter. Give it a nice heavy coating. Make sure it's all covered. And then we will go ahead and make our pinwheel shapes. So now that we have a nice heavy coat of cinnamon sugar, we're going to go ahead and just start by folding over this edge. Our first edge will be our start. And it's because it's uneven. Takes a little bit of finesse here to get a good edge started. And once you get that started, then you can just continue to use your fingers. Get this started to roll up. Really doesn't matter what end you go from when you roll out a circular shape. They're both going to be pretty much the same as long as you have an even thickness. That's really the only thing that matters. So there's not really a go from a small end or the narrow end. On this, it doesn't really matter. You're just going to start on an edge. Once you've got it like this, then you can generally just take both edges and start rolling with your fingers, just like this. And just keep rolling until you have it completely rolled up. Now that you've got your pie dough all rolled up with your cinnamon sugar inside, as you see there, just kind of squeeze it together a little bit just to kind of secure it. And then you just cut into little sizes that you like. And you'll put these on an ungreased cookie sheet. You can actually cut these with a knife, or if you want to be super precise and keep their nice round shape, you can also go ahead and use dental floss and cut them that way. That's how I tend to do my cinnamon rolls, to make sure that they don't squash down in shape. But for these, like I say, they're just a quick treat after making a pie to use up your leftover pie dough so you're not wasting it. And they're wonderful. Now that you have all your pinwheels all cut, like I say, you can take them and reshape them a little bit if you want, but it's not necessary. They're all ready to go in the oven on an ungreased cookie sheet. You're going to put them in at 425 degrees, the same temperature that you would use to bake your pie. And they go in for about 10, maybe 15 minutes at the most, till they're golden brown and crispy. The crust will get crispy on the outside, and they'll still be nice and soft and buttery cinnamon in the swirl area. And you don't have to worry about placement on your pan. You won't want them to touch, but you don't have to put them a certain distance apart because obviously being pie crust, they don't rise. So you can put them in right like this and then come out fresh, hot, and wonderfully buttery and cinnamon flavor.